Well, perfect. Well, thank you everybody for taking the time to join us on our 10th episode of our Stay Moving series. Today we have a very special guest. I'm really excited to introduce him in a moment, but just wanted to kind of give you guys a little bit of context on our SMS. So for those who do not know, every week we bring in an esteemed guest, and the goal of this hour-long open dialogue is essentially to share knowledge and insight for everybody. So hopefully, as you're going through this, our hopes are not that you not only keep a step ahead in the shifting economy. We've seen a lot of things change in 2020, but hopefully we want you to think differently. And through our open dialogue, our hopes are that we all work together and become stronger on the other side, taking a lot of this insight and information to essentially pivot yourself successfully come the end of 2020. So today's agenda, the way that we roll this every single time, today's weekly topic is building businesses and hiring talent. We'll go through some industry stats. We'll meet Brendan Rogers here in a second. He was our guest. We'll go through business topics, creative and digital. And then at the end, we just kind of sum it up. So like I said earlier, today we'll be really diving into more of like the VC space, building businesses, hiring talent, and how that juxtaposition really comes together and really does 1 + 1 = 3. So some of the key stats that we've seen today, which is astounding, is that, before COVID, so we had 7,600 venture rounds generated in Q1 of 2020. That's a lot of money going back into businesses and really the opportunity of bringing an idea to completion. The other stat is $34.2 billion invested from VC firms in Q1 of 2020 as well. And then the last stat is $1.5 trillion was invested in venture capitalist deals worldwide between 2010 and 2019. And so what is very interesting is that I know a lot of people consider the Silicon Valley being one of the main places. But over the last, 5 to 10 years, we've actually seen a lot of businesses spread their wealth all across the United States. Which is really exciting, I think, just from a business standpoint, accessibility, and especially nowadays being very virtual. It's really interesting to see how much is shifting. And so today, without further ado, we're really excited to bring in somebody who knows, I'd say, a thing or two about this industry. Welcome, Brendan Rogers, and can you give us a quick little synopsis of who you are and kind of where you're at today?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really do appreciate it. So I'm originally from Rhode Island, and I reside in LA, and I'm one of the co-founders of a company called Wag, which is the mobile dog walking application. We essentially connect pet parents to dog walkers, and I spent 5.5 amazing, grateful years at Wag, and most recently started my new venture, which is I invest my own capital into, pre-seed and seed stage companies through my venture arm, 2.A.M Ventures. And then in parallel, I have a talent firm that places IC talent all the way up to executive board level talent from pre-seed all the way to Series D companies. So pretty much split my time between Northern and Southern California. I also mentor and advise different accelerators in LA, Palo Alto, and in Asia.
It's awesome, man. And I'm sure everybody knows that company he founded. So cool. Super happy to have you, my man. I'm really excited. Your career, we were looking it up anyways too, and it's just so impressive what you've been able to do. So really excited to kind of dig a little bit deeper in there. So what we want to do, just kind of starting off, for those that don't know, just really start with business topics. And we have about 3 or so that we really want to dive a little bit deeper in, and then we'll just have an open dialogue. Like I said earlier, the goal of this is really just to have a good open conversation. I'll ask a question, and then I'll kick it over to you, and then we'll kind of go on and on from there. So I'm sure everybody, just to kind of get it out of the way in that regards, obviously, you're talking about earlier, the story of Wag, an on-demand dog walking app created in 2015. Now it's available everywhere and in 4,600 cities, you name it. Super impressive, to say the least. And so I guess just on this, for those that don't know, you guys had a very high valuation, and this company was very successful. And so for you, looking back, how important was the founding team to reaching this valuation? And can you just talk a little bit about the early days and how you kind of built it together?
Yeah. So, Wag was WAG was started in a time where the gig economy was really taking off. So you had companies like Instacart, and you had companies like Uber and Airbnb and Lyft that just were getting crazy traction and really having product market fit throughout the United States and then expanding globally. And we also, my co-founders and I just saw a lot of VC dollars going into a lot of other Uber for X type model businesses during that time. And we realized that if you can really have good unit economics and good, GMV, then, you probably could receive, funding from, either small funds or angels or whatnot. So what was interesting is that I lived near a hiking trail in LA called Runyon Canyon. And that is where a lot of people bring their dogs, and there's a bunch of dog walkers. And if whoever knows about LA, can get really hot, and dogs are stuck inside all day because people are working and the traffic is horrendous. And, when I was thinking about like what is next, we saw that there was an opportunity to enter the market with dog walking because there wasn't a massive business really capturing pet services. You didn't really see a Petco or a PetSmart really having a dog walking service. It was more like, Michael's dog walking service or Brendan's dog walking service. So there was an entry into the market. And what we realized was that in LA specifically, a lot of people have side hustles because they are either trying to, be entrepreneurs themselves, or they want to get into entertainment, whatever the case may be. So we saw that on the supply side, it could be a good opportunity to get the supply, whereas traditionally in companies like Uber and DoorDash and Lyft, acquisition costs of drivers can be very, very high. So we decided to launch a prototype in the West Hollywood and Hollywood area, bringing on some local dog walkers and having a very basic mobile version of the app where you could see your dog being tracked live on a GPS map, and after you could see where the dog is, to have full transparency of where the walk is happening. And then at the end of the walk, you get a report card on how the walk did, and then all the financial transactions done through the app. So that's kind of how it all started. But we saw the vision, and the vision for the business. And it's funny because 99.9% of the LA investors all passed on the seed round because people thought it was just a lifestyle business. People thought dog walking is not a business that could like get to this crazy scale and, just capture the whole pet parent market. But we knew, and the vision for the business was, we knew that if we could get inside the pet parent's house and provide an amazing, trustworthy, safe experience, and they could use us over and over again and have this high frequent, high retention product, then we could then upsell them and increase lifetime value by offering dog sitting, dog daycare, food delivery, and really be the button on your phone for your pet. So that was like the vision. That was like the start. And it was crazy. I mean, we had our first office was in a house near Runyon Canyon. We had about 25, customer service mixed in with engineers. Just pretty much like the Facebook movie. If you've ever seen that, it was. But those early everybody that's ever been a part of the business has provided an insane amount of value. But the founder, us as founders, and also the early employees, people were so passionate about what they were contributing to, and the amount of energy and how people showed up every day to really push the company forward was extremely magical.
Brandon, if you sorry.
Bad, man. I remember, it's so funny. I remember that idea that you literally had where you can watch your dog. I just thought it was a game changer. It's like, what more does somebody want to have, and I remember my friend actually using it. I think it was maybe 2016 was when they started using it in LA as well. And I remember all about that. But yeah, it's crazy to see how much it's grown.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we did a lot of non-scalable things at first to really build like a dedicated community. And I think that really helped from a growth perspective, because a lot of our early growth was through word of mouth, which I feel like is the best type of marketing, to say the least, to some degree. So yeah, great experience.
Yeah, and I guess just, kind of even shifting from there, right? So can you maybe just tell me how, at the end of WAG, then from there you started this company, and I mean it's brilliant. Like essentially, for those of you who don't know, 2.A.M Ventures, pre-seed, seed funding, and I love that you're doing, like I said earlier, where it's like you help talents, you help find people, and then you also help invest with companies. And I just think it's such a brilliant business model because you're kind of taking all your skills from WAG, right, and then you're moving it into your next venture. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. So probably the last 2.5 to 3 years at WAG, we went through this inflection point where we had we raised, multiple rounds of financing. And when you raise multiple rounds of financing, you usually need to hire new people. And my skill sets are very operational and more customer service heavy. And I took on the responsibilities of hiring, and I never really was ever really thought about recruiting and never thought about taking on that. But I was the founder that was always making sure that people were happy and culture was great. And I would always be the one that would always talk about WAG outside of the office. And I just love one of my skill sets that I've identified is I just love to talk to people. I could probably talk to you guys for the next 8 hours. And that for some reason, when I fell in the lap of recruiting, those skill sets really helped out with recruiting. So I, after WAG, I built throughout the last year and a half, I would say, I really have been building my personal brand and just building my relationships with founders because WAG got to a point where it was so big that it was not, to me personally, was not a startup anymore. And I mean, my vibe is I came out to Silicon Valley with nothing and a suitcase, and everybody in Rhode Island was like, okay, we'll see you in a month. And I love the early stages of startups, and I love meeting early stage founders. So I started building my brand and just building my network. And after I left WAG, I decided what am I going to do next? I love angel investing. I love being a part of accelerators and just speaking with founders. So I asked myself well, how can I provide immediate value, start a new business, use my network, use my investing to get more clients for recruiting and vice versa. So I launched a talent firm that basically really works with startups that are primarily at the seed stage, and then later where I attract and hire engineers to non-technical people to executives, but it gives me an opportunity to work with all different types of businesses. It gives me an opportunity to really understand how different industries are working and different industries trends. And it gives me an opportunity to look at new deals. So when I work with a seed stage company and they're hiring a couple people, I get really close with the founders. I develop a relationship, and organically that has helped me been able to get into these deals as an investor as well. So that's kind of how it started. And I think recruiting is interesting from a scalability perspective because you can essentially be really distributed and you don't really need to, there's really no overhead costs and stuff like that. So I hired a team that is spread throughout the United States where these recruiters have also worked in startups and are very aligned with my mission and core values. And we work on amazing roles and stuff like that. So it's been a pleasure to transition my skill sets from WAG into what I'm doing now.
That's awesome. And so going back on that, I mean, I love that you were saying earlier, at WAG, one of your main things was really culture. And, nowadays I think that's the thing that really truly drives businesses forward, right? And so can you talk to me a little bit about, you were on one side, right? You're on the WAG side and you were raising money. Now you said earlier that you're essentially kind of taking your own cash, right? And then you're investing in different companies. What type of stuff are you looking for with different companies when you do want to start investing in? Are there a couple key things that you're looking for?
Yeah, so I would say like for me, and I think every investor's perspective is different at the pre-seed and seed stage level, but I would say first and foremost, like I look at the team and I look at the founders, and it, you know, it's I a lot of the time at that stage of a startup, business models change, the whole company changes, founder drama happens, and one quits and one doesn't. I really look at the founding team and identify, are these the people that can execute on this idea? And if it's not the idea, are they going to be able to get back up and execute on something else? So first and foremost, it's the team. I mean, you can have the best idea in the world. You can literally have like the most groundbreaking technology, but if you can't execute and if you don't have the right team members, it's going to be hard to really get that to scale and get product market fit. So number one is team. And then number two, I would say is like, how big is the market? I think there's a lot of great businesses out there that are not necessarily like venture backed businesses, but can be great lifestyle businesses and great businesses for founders and stuff like that. So I looked at how big is the total addressable market? Is this an industry that is growing very, very fast? Is this an industry that a lot of people are taking a liking to? And like, for an example, you know, esports is something that I personally think is an industry that year over year, and especially now and during the COVID times, and what we're experiencing is that esports is just up and to the right with new users and users that you would never think are playing esports or playing esports. So examples like that are industry and industry trends that I try to look for and stuff like that. So yeah, that those are probably the first two.
That's awesome, man. It's super helpful. Yeah, so I guess that's perfect kind of segue, right? I mean, we've seen, investing in like we're talking about earlier, just kind of the state of it is just, at the beginning of 2020, a lot of money was being poured into it. And so on the right-hand side, we just kind of have a graph of, since April, most funding has gone to health tech, fintech. We all know like that's the huge new buzz that's happening. Cybersecurity, I think SaaS just, financially makes a lot of sense to invest money, and then logistics and food, right? There's just been a lot of different companies just changing in those marketplaces. So, from your point of view, where do you kind of see the future of investing in maybe VC firms and stuff like that? Because I know a lot of things have changed.
Yeah, I would say that, what I've seen is I think health tech that's a great example of an industry that is growing just given the times that we're in. I think that this pandemic has really shifted a lot of, it has shifted America. I think we're going into America 2.0, and you're either on the boat or you're off the boat. And I feel like if you can adapt to what is to come and the changes that we've been making, I think there's going to be a lot of really successful businesses that are started. But I think that I think people are more awakened and more observant now of health than they were before. So I feel that health tech, and not so much around like the coronavirus in general, but I think that health in general we're going through like a phase where companies are now like more health tech founders are emerging because people are more receptive to their health. And I think that's, and then that could be like mental health, that could be physical health, that could be from like medical, prescriptions, whatever it is. And then I also am aligned with fintech as well, because I think now there's a lot of great consumer-facing fintech apps. There's a lot of software and platforms out there that allow you to really take ownership over your financial well-being. And I think that how people this unemployment rate is extremely high. You're seeing more people now start side hustles, which is great. I think just financial management and financial tech or fintech companies, like I can definitely see a higher adoption of new users in that industry for sure. So I'm totally aligned, but I would say I would agree with those two categories as like the future. And I also think like the third would be like more like frontier tech and deep tech. I see that a lot of new funds that are emerging of like how to create and funds that are investing in like businesses that are very much out there. Like taking old clothes and making them into yarn, or like just wearable technology businesses that are really helping human life and stuff like that. So I think those are the three main things that I see trends that are growing up to the right.
That's awesome, man. The last kind of question, and then we'll kind of cap up the business so we can get into the other ones, is, once somebody gets money, or you help them secure funding and from your background, like what are like some of like the main, let's just call it like the top three things that you prioritize with that money, right? Like say you get a lump sum, what are kind of the next three things that you advise, founders and early stage leaders on to invest their money into? I know it's kind of a big question, but just kind of curious.
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, when you raise funding, no matter if it's $50K, $25K, $300 million, you have not won. You're like just getting started. And I think that everybody that raises capital, like it is a milestone. You should for sure definitely celebrate the highs. However, I think a lot of people are like, oh, we raised money. Now we can kind of like put our feet up and kind of coast through this. I think that before you raise any capital, you should have a product roadmap, and you should figure out like for the next 6 to 12 months, like what is going to move the needle for this business on getting to the next level? Is it hiring? Is it launching new features? Is it getting new customers? Really set milestones, and once the money's in the bank, like really prioritize those milestones. So what's your P0? What's your P1? What's your P2? And I think every business is different, but I think that usually when you raise funding, like I mentioned earlier, you want to make like a hire or two, whatever your situation is, so you can build out new features, you can get new clients, whatever the case may be. But the way I mentor and advise founders is like have a roadmap, have a 6 to 12 month roadmap, whether if it's a product roadmap, a revenue roadmap, whatever it is, and then align what you need to get to hit those milestones and use that cash to do that.
Sweet. And so I guess on that regards then, kind of tying in that, like, what have you seen companies do? Like, what should they not do that maybe you've seen some founders do that you're always like, no, don't do that?
I would say, just for instance, like office space. I think that office space, especially if you're like
going down.
Yeah, if you're like an LA founder, a Silicon Valley founder, I'm sure where you guys are at in San Diego, it's super high. Office space is expensive, especially in these cities. So like, I wouldn't if my burn is like, X amount, I wouldn't be spending an insane amount of money on office space. I think if you build a great culture and you hire the right people, you don't need to even be in an office, and you can have a distributed team and still execute and still win. So I advise people to like really second guess and really understand, like, does it make sense to have an office space or office space rather? And then I would say like, don't just hire to hire because you don't want to do shit. There's a lot of times where I'll give you an example. We raised $300 million for Wag, right? It's a lot of money. We hired a bunch of people, but I mean, there was some of the hires that we made. I mean, they're great hires, but like, are we just adding just Band-Aids because people just don't want to execute on these things anymore? Like, people can still like have more on their plate. So I advise founders is like, okay, what's your product roadmap? Like, what is the roadmap? And like, do you need more people to get there? Because you have way too much on your plate. You need to hire somebody because this is bottlenecking us. We need to hire somebody. So really understanding, does it make sense to make a hire and stuff like that? And then the third thing, which is kind of funny because I'm in recruiting, but I think recruiting companies are way too expensive. And I think that founders, like, it's hard to hire and manage a business at the same time. So I think a lot of founders will engage with recruiters where they're going to be paying a lot of money to recruiters, and they could probably just put in a little bit of effort, use their network, and hire without paying crazy amount of money for recruiting tools. probably it.
Yeah, sweet. Well, thank you, man. That sums up the business. I'll kick it on over to the creative side.
Yep. Thanks, Josh. Like you said earlier, the importance of mentors. I think this is so valuable to have, especially when you're building an early stage startup, having somebody who can tell you what to do because they've been there before. And I got this from the Harvard Business Review. It said 84%, and this is mentors for CEOs. 84% said mentors have helped them avoid costly mistakes. 84% became proficient faster in their roles. 69% made better decisions. And I love that you mentioned earlier with Wag, you're like, we were doing things that don't scale. And one of my mentors from Y Combinator, this is like a huge Y Combinator message, was always like, do things that don't scale. So I find that to be extremely valuable. Starting off with mentors, how has mentors shaped your personal career?
Yeah, I would say that I think so. Like I don't really have specific like this is my mentor. I kind of come up with this thing where like everybody should have their like board of directors in their life, and like your imaginary board of directors. So like I essentially have my own board, right? And I have these people that I rely on for certain things. So it could be business, it could be health, it could be real estate. So like I've not necessarily have had a mentor specifically for business, but I have people in my network that I trust, and we've built a relationship over time where I'll reach out to and be like, hey, what are your thoughts on this? Blah, blah, blah. And people reach out to me that are on my board of directors, and we like consistently have that dialogue and that conversation. So, mentors and whatnot have helped me more so just like from motivation to just like really like having a other perspective on things. I think like one thing people, especially founders, it's the same eyeballs on the product. It's the same eyeballs like talking with each other, but having new eyeballs and a different perspective from somebody you trust, I think can kind of, calm you down and like really like put things in perspective. So it's definitely helped me. And I encourage all people, I encourage everybody, no matter if you're a founder or whatever you do in life, you should have people that you trust and rely on that can give you their perspective on things and like really take their perspective and like, thoughtfully think about it.
And having the confidence to know that you're going the right direction too, I think is a big thing. Like I feel like a lot of brands will struggle to execute on certain initiatives because, they might not have, they've been looking at the same project over and over again and haven't had the conviction to know that I can go forward with this. But when you have that backup to say, this is a good idea and I agree with you, I think that's just as powerful as well.
Yeah, totally. And I think that like there's a lot of founders that are just so married to their baby where like it's either my way or the highway. And I see a lot of those companies going out of business and just really not getting to the next step because they're not embracing other people's feedback. And it doesn't matter who you are, what level you're at. Like that's another thing. And I'm sure we'll talk about culture, but like, great culture is made by taking everybody's feedback, no matter if you're an intern or if you're the CEO, but embracing everybody's feedback and applying it and taking everybody's feedback equally, as important. I think really is like that moves the business forward. That makes people want to work for people like that. That makes people like stick around and have like a low churn rate. So yeah, for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to echo what you said, having somebody come in with a bird's eye view, not just with like you said, your business, but your life. That's why you listen to your parents, because they can come in and give you some thoughts that can actually really guide you. The next creative topic is the art of creating the right pitch deck. Me personally, I was in the startup space and, we pitched over to 100 VCs, and I felt like half of the VCs were, I want a deck that's under 8 pages. And then the other half was like, I don't want a snippet deck. I want something that's more elaborate with like 50 pages. And, Slide Beam right here does a great job of of providing like what Airbnb pitched to get their funding, and Facebook and Snapchat. I guess when you're combing through all these pitch decks and you're looking for what companies to invest in, you talked about the product roadmap earlier. What are some of those key things that you're looking for in a deck?
Yeah, I would say that like slide decks or pitch decks rather, I think they evolve over time. And I feel like as you go through different rounds of funding, the pitch deck just changes because you have more data, you have more customers. It's just, but primarily through like a pre-seed or a seed stage deck, like you don't have that much. Sometimes the product hasn't even launched yet and there's zero data. And sometimes there's very limited data. So I feel like the best way to build a pitch deck if you're at the pre-seed and seed stage level is just really identify like what the problem is, what the solution is, how big the market is, and this is how we're going to capitalize on it. And that's I'm someone that you don't need 50 pages of just BS. Like you want to get to the point. Like with Wag, we walk your dog on demand, and we connect pet parents and dog walkers, and we will walk your dog. Full transparency of your dog being walked. That's it. It's a whole product. 10 slides are left to get you to put your credit card in. Those are the businesses that I feel like are very easy to digest. I feel like investors you only have limited time with investors. And I feel like if they don't understand it, if you can't tell your product to your grandma, your grandfather, you probably should like either rethink how to pitch it or change your company. But like, yeah, I would just be like very just basic. Like it's like the one thing people get wrong is that they think that like when like the investor is some like God and like we have to respect these people and like they're like at this level because they went to Harvard Business School and all this wild shit. Getting an investor is like getting in a marriage. Like if you're getting in bed with this person for the next 8 to 9 years, the average time frame to liquidity, I think, is like 7 years for startups, if you even raise money. So like, I feel like it's like pitching is like so over diluted and like it needs to be more conversational and get to know the person and like understand like why this person is building this company. Because like usually times when people build the companies are like there's an itch that they're scratching or like they see an opportunity in the market. And like I feel like the best deals are the founders that have a very clear, concise pitch deck. It's not overwhelming. It's very easy to understand, but it's more coming from passion and inside and conversational. So sorry that was a long answer to your question, but those are my thoughts.
No, that's awesome, man. Yeah,
that's a great point, especially like if it doesn't hit your gut and you can understand it, in just 2 or 3 sentences, then maybe you should go back and rethink what you're doing and figure out a better way to really storytell that product or service. And then going into the last topic, you mentioned the importance of mental health earlier. It was really cool to see, I believe, Headspace, all the people that lost their jobs, they were giving out, especially now during COVID being home, free service meditation for those that were unemployed. And I saw a stat that said more than 80% surveyed employees plan to offer virtual mental health services to their employees in 2020, up to 95% by 2022. Do you believe when building a company, there's an opportunity now more than ever to really double down on mental health and taking that just as serious as anything else that you're building within your company?
Yeah, 1,000%. I can tell you firsthand that the first 9 to 10 months at Wag, I didn't work out. I didn't really do anything else. My whole life was Wag. And, it for sure, it speeds up the process to burnout. I feel like mental health is just like everything else. It should be classified as like physical health, and it should be classified as top of mind to everybody. I think that in the startup space, especially if you're if you're say you raised a little bit of money and you barely have that much traction, you're really not growing, and you know you only have 8 months left. You know, there's a lot of anxiety that comes with that. There's a lot of, you know, I gotta pay my employees. They have kids. They have put food on the table. Like, there's a lot of emotions that are in these journeys. So I feel like mental health should be top of mind and should be embedded in culture. And I think that every HR leader should be, you know, even the founders, like, you know, really having, like, you know, you do your weekly one-on-one check-ins, like, for, like, from a work perspective, there should be, like, with your manager or your direct report, like, you know, one-on-ones on, like, how things are going and, like, you know, what can we do to improve your, you know, your work here and, like, you know, your mental space here and stuff like that. So yeah, I apps like Calm and Headspace, like, I'm so passionate about that space. Like, that, I think that's a really up and coming space, because now more than ever, like, you're seeing that, you know, mental health is something that it needs to be top of mind, and more people are being more receptive to that and stuff like that, for sure. So that's great that Calm did that. I didn't know they did that. That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm going to pass it off to Ben here to take it away on the digital topics.
Thank you, mate. Yeah, Brendan, great to meet you. I think, you know, the digital side is kind of more focused on, you know, talking about VCs and talent and things like that. So looking at more digital resources like your online platforms, your digital marketing, websites, and things like that. So I think first things first, you know, doing a little research on 2.A.M. and, you know, your background and everything, I felt like your LinkedIn profile was one of the most incredible I've ever seen. Like, you go down, you see some of your background and the boards that you're a part of, and then there's a button to expand that. And then I expand it and I scroll down, and then there's another button to expand. And your portfolio literally just kept getting bigger and bigger. So I guess I'm curious, from your standpoint, what kind of role has LinkedIn played in? And this is something we're kind of passionate about at the moment. A lot of our content we're sharing on LinkedIn. We're building relationships, just from a networking standpoint. So long-winded question, sorry, but I'm curious on your standpoint, what kind of role has LinkedIn played for you as a business professional, as well as from a VC funding standpoint?
Yeah, for sure. So LinkedIn is, for me, like I said earlier, I took the long route to Silicon Valley. I essentially went up, like, you know, Pacific Coast Highway to Silicon Valley. It took me a really long time. And it took me, like, I didn't go to Stanford. I didn't come from my family isn't, last name is, like, you know, buildings at Harvard. Like, that's not what I came from. And I always knew that networking is something that, like, has really, it has always opened up doors for me, and it's always, like, has gotten me to that next step in my life. And it was about a year ago where my father, he was just like, wow, like, you know, you are part of these great companies, but, like, what are you going to do after? Like, what are you going to do for you? And, like, what about like the story that, like, you've done so far and created? And I was inherently on LinkedIn because of recruiting, right? So, like, I saw all these posts on LinkedIn about, like, you know, talking about how, like, people pitched all these investors, they didn't raise money, talking about how, like, you know, they got their millionth customer, just, like, crazy stories. So I'm like, I have all these stories inside of me. I went on this crazy journey so far. Like, why can't I just put that in my own words and just express myself? And it was almost like therapy, where I had all this bottled up energy where I was like, I just got to put it out there. And I saw a trend in LinkedIn where it went from, like, really, really long articles to now it's more like Twitter-like posts, and it's more evolving into a social network like a Twitter or an Instagram. And I am not a writer whatsoever. Like, I'll never write a LinkedIn article, but I just, something just went off in my head, and I just started posting, and, you know, I, like, zero engagement, but I remember having a couple people reach out to me and be like, thank you for posting, like, how to, like, reach out to an angel investor. Like, thank you so much for this. And I was like, wow, like this is actually like kind of like I'm providing value to people. Like I'm actually like helping people's businesses, and I just kept doing it. And I just like A/B tested the shit out of different posts, different types of posts, the structure of posts. And I just kept posting and posting. And it was funny because I kept getting like a little bit more comments, a little bit more comments. My girlfriend was like, you have to respond to every single person, no matter if it takes hours, like respond. Like you have to make sure that you're building a trustworthy brand. It's just like Wag, like, you have to build trust with the community. So I did that, and it's played a huge role in what I've been doing for the last like year. I think that if you're not building your personal brand and your company's brand on LinkedIn, like you might as well just go do something else, because right now the platform, LinkedIn, just through multiple iterations of A/B testing and stuff like that, it is a platform right now where you can get an insane amount of reach with not having that many followers, because there's no one posts. Like the amount of people that post on LinkedIn from a user perspective is probably less than 5%. So I encourage everybody to really post on LinkedIn, but not just post like bullshit articles, like actually talk about like your story, your journey, because I believe that everybody's unique and everybody can provide value in their own way, and everybody has like a story to tell, and you can help other people and people interact with that content. And if you keep consistently posting and providing value to people, you will start growing your network, and opportunities will open that you never thought would happen. And I can't tell you the amount of people that I have talked to in the last year and a half on LinkedIn, and I'm not expecting any ROI in real time, like, but you plant seeds, and like, as you keep talking to more people, more shit happens and more shit happens. And, so I encourage everybody. That's how I got into it. I'm super passionate about LinkedIn, and, I think that there's a huge opportunity to, build your personal brand, but also as a company too. Like it's a great way to get clients and just keep building and putting more fuel to that fire.
Yeah, I think one of the toughest things is people kind of making that hurdle to put themselves in front of the screen and be a person who is credible and authoritative and has experience, right? Everyone's got their own niche of skill sets that they can, majority of the time, they know 90%, like more than 95% of the people out there in their specific field. So kind of understanding that and getting that under your belt, I think should provide the confidence for people to come out and try and share experiences that they've had, whether it's business or personal. And we've just, like I mentioned, we've started doing it recently and just seen a ton of great responses and providing, feedback and ideas and just talking topics for people. And LinkedIn's been great too, just having they've just added their video in the last few months, I think. And just a really, like you mentioned, an opportunity on a platform to get an insane amount of reach. So it's fantastic. Kind of moving on to the digital side. So we do a ton of digital marketing, and I think there's a lot of agencies and brands out there that, digital has become sort of the forefront of their marketing plan, right? Whether it's like you can see here, I signed up for Wag last year, and every couple of weeks they'll send me this little photo of my puppy. That's Remy right there. And, remind me, hey, there's a Wag walker nearby. So you've got text messaging, email, Facebook, Instagram. So I'm curious from your standpoint on the VC side, what's been your experience with new partners that you guys have had in terms of their digital strategy? And is there any tried and true, recommendations you guys have from day one for every brand in terms of what they should be executing on?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And I think that now you're seeing companies that are kind of getting exposed that they just pour money into Facebook's bank account and Instagram's bank account, well, it's the same company, but just buying users and all these users just churning out, and LTV doesn't make any sense to what CAC is, and these companies are just burning money. I think that from a VC perspective on mentoring, or even in talking with portfolio companies on ad spend, is like, I think that it's you have to really understand like who your users are first, and understand like an A/B test with very small budgets, like, does CAC and LTV make sense? What's the payback period? If you have a 22-month payback period, it probably doesn't make that much sense unless LTV is extremely high, whatever the case may be. But I think that first and foremost, especially like early stage companies, they should just be extremely receptive to it being experimental. So like, focus on paid channels, understand like very small budgets, like try different channels, understand like, okay, who are your customers? Where are your customers? What platforms are they on? Go try to do organic, try to organic channels that make sense. I can tell you right now with Wag, we didn't spend $1 in advertising the first 6 months, probably over $500 a month, if that, because we just went up to where our customers were at Runyon Canyon and dog parks, and we just told our dog walkers, go, here's a promo card, go sign up or go give these out to pet parents in the dog parks. So like I tell founders, experiment with very low budgets, understand the data, understand who your like customer is, like, and maybe there's ways to identify where that customer is without spending an arm and a leg.
Yeah, great. And I guess in terms of the future of digital marketing, have you seen any platforms that have, really been like growing fast in terms of, new startup VC-backed brands that are, doing really well? I think text messaging's that's come out relatively recently, I want to say last 2 or 3 years or so, where it's really blown up.
Yeah, I would say like platforms, like what platforms are really emerging, like that you can get that are like good paid channels. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, paid or organic. I think just from a digital standpoint, like email, for example, is one that sticks out to me as incredibly profitable because it's not a very high cost platform, but a lot of brands are putting that on their website to get subscribers, and that just increases the number of touch points that they can have.
Yeah, I think that, yeah, for sure. I would say email, text messaging. I think that just like with Wag, that was a great example. Like we do a lot of things that are, I wouldn't say like growth hacky, but there's multiple touch points throughout the journey of owning a pet that we can then convert you into a paying customer, signups, whatever the case may be. So I would say, yeah, email, text, but like, if we're talking about pre-seed, seed to some degree, like before you think about email campaigns, text messaging and all this, like understand like who are your customers and like get on the phone and like pick up the phone and like start talking and like, or go to the dog parks and start going up to people and like understand if people want to use your shit and if people will pay for it. I think that's like the first step. And then once you understand, okay, well, people like actually want to use this. Now, how can we create these different touch points and where do our customers live? Like, and I think you're seeing that on obviously Facebook and Instagram, but all of that is like, it's expensive. There's a lot of competition. So I would say like what Paul Graham said at YC, like we said earlier, like, would you rather have 1 million customers that sort of like you or 100 customers that are obsessed with your product that will use you every single day? So like, I would say for pre-seed, seed, like really focus on identifying who your target customer is and what free organic channels work, but be very experimental and be receptive to trying these different channels like email and text and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, especially just knowing, I mean, an omni-channel approach is almost imperative for everyone, but just getting to know where your customers are at throughout that buying process is just important to define, specifically what platforms you're going to use. So lastly, I want to talk a little bit more on the talent and recruiting side. So something that I think you guys do, which is amazing, is, and I'm surprised that it's not a value prop for a lot of VC firms, is being able to hire the talent and find the right resources for these brands to really grow and scale. And so I'm curious, what's the process for you in terms of finding talent for these brands that you work with? I know, like we mentioned before, you do a ton of work on LinkedIn and you're really building your network on there. But how do you go about finding the resources and partners for these brands that you're partnering with in terms of, talent and employees?
Yeah. So, I mean, like I use LinkedIn obviously from a sourcing perspective. So I usually source 99.99%. No, I'd probably say 95% of the hires that, we make are people that are currently very happy in their role, or they're already working somewhere and we're actually pulling them out of their business to another business. And there's different, obviously, ways to do that. But LinkedIn is a place where I source talent. But one thing that I think is really interesting is that, you know, I utilize I want to build my network, even though you don't want to work for the company I'm telling you about. But usually engineers know engineers. So I use a lot of like things where I'm like, you know, if say I reach out to someone and they're like, this is really not for me, it's great to, you know, meet you, blah, blah, blah. I will, you know, then really ask if they know anyone. And usually a lot of the times people are like very receptive on that. So I just use I use LinkedIn, probably 95% of my time for sourcing.
Wow.
And actually get, even from the business development standpoint, like just like reaching out to founders, asking if they need help, on the recruiting side. I also, like, if I am doing like BD or whatever, I'll find open roles. Like if say I'm looking to work with a business and I want to hire people for a startup, I'll type it, like I'll Google like, you know, VP of product roles in LA, and I'll see a list of companies, and I'll just go to LinkedIn and find all the founders or the HR people, the recruiters, and just reach out to them that way. But yeah, I would say pretty much LinkedIn. There's times where like I'll reach out to the accelerators I'm a part of. Usually there's a lot of great talent that are in these accelerators. Maybe their company wasn't, you know, funded or whatever the case may be. So there's a lot of people looking for roles. But I think it's interesting now because since the unemployment rate, unfortunately, is so high, there's a lot of people on LinkedIn looking for roles. So it's like, it's a really great market right now to find great talent.
Yeah. Have you seen any specific trends within your brand partners or business partners among, you know, the type of talent that they're looking for? Like I hear a lot, mostly from our developers, that developers are in high demand, and, you know, there's not a lot of supply out there. Is there any trends that you've seen within industries?
I see that so I think a lot of businesses have been affected by the coronavirus. So there's some of my companies that I work with completely paused hiring, or if not, are going out of business. I'm seeing that I think from an engineering perspective, I think the diligence process, I think the bar is a little bit higher on hiring, because I think companies that are surviving this pandemic, and I think companies that are thriving in this pandemic, are still being very restricted on cash and cash coming out. So I think that just the diligence process and the bar is a lot higher on hiring. And really founders and leaders of different departments within companies are really asking themselves and other team members of the business, do we really need to make these hires right now? Do we really want to pay a recruiter right now? Stuff like that. That's what I'm seeing. That's it. But I think the dust is starting to a little bit like settle to some degree. I think that there is a little bit of like, you know, more companies are now opening more roles up. I think the dust is starting to settle a little bit.
Yeah, awesome. Great. I'll pass it off to Josh. Brennan, thank you so much, man. This is incredibly insightful, so I appreciate it.
Cool. Well, yeah, just we'd like to kind of recap it for all those, you know, just kind of recapping awesome story on Wag and 2.A.M. Ventures. And we're just really excited to kind of see what you create next, and just continually take that story and really use that passion that you've cultivated over the years. Also love learning, you know, from you kind of the future of investing and where it's headed. Very interesting to kind of see, you know, what's happened over the last 10 years. And I love that you said like the importance of, it's not just about finding one mentor, but like a group, like an invisible, like advisory board is what you said.
Your own board.
Love that idea. And I think that's just such a cool thing to have. And then, you know, the art of creating pitch decks. And I think everybody just like overcomplicates them. Like, what are the key things? You know, you said problem solution, you said market size, like who are you? Why do you matter? And how many can get done? I love that, you know, we chatted about the idea of like, you know, mental health should be equally important, you know, as physical health, and, you know, leaders should find ways to put it into their one-on-ones. How to leverage and grow LinkedIn. And I love that you said reply to every single person, because I think it's so important, not just from a trustworthy standpoint, but it's also a huge metric to help, you know, increase reach. right? Platforms love that type of stuff. They love conversation. It's built on social. And then just kind of the last part that I just hit on is just the process behind sourcing and recruiting talent, and really kind of what you're seeing now. So thank you again. We have one final question that we just love to ask everybody. At Movetic, we created essentially a tagline called "Stay Moving," and I just would love to understand, you know, when you hear the idea of like "stay moving," what does that mean to you?
It means that you got to just keep pushing. Every day is a fight. It's a street fight. You're in the trenches. You know, you just got to keep pushing and keep executing. And it's a never-ending cycle, but it's part of your journey, and every journey I believe is super special. So I love that tagline, by the way. I was gonna compliment you guys. I think that's so badass. That's like tattoo worthy potentially. So yeah, that's how I did it.
I'll get it.
I'll get it. Let's go.
Sweet, man. Well, thank you again. And do you have any other kind of just thoughts or any other things that maybe you wanted to chat about earlier that you may want to kind of like touch on at the end? Anything else?
From my perspective?
Yep.
No, that's pretty much it. I just encourage everybody, you know, if you are thinking about starting a business, if you're thinking about joining a startup, like, you know, really, I can tell you right now that it changed my life, and you know, it's a journey that I think everybody can benefit from and learn from, and really develop long-lasting relationships. So I just encourage everybody to, if you're thinking about getting in the startup world, you know, really take that first step, because I promise you won't regret it.
Love that, man. Well, cool. Well, thank you, everybody. I really appreciate the time that everybody took to go through this. And so I hope you all have a great rest of your day.